Right, guys. First of all, welcome to the podcast to Saoirse McHugh, hosted by myself, Chris Gavigan, Peter Cassidy, and Stephen Kelly. Saoirse, welcome to the Dead Hedgehogs podcast.
Hi,
Thanks very much for having me.
Excellent.
Thanks for coming on, Saoirse.
So, for anyone that didn't know, Saoirse ran for the Green Party for the European elections and for a TD. How obviously that was a year ago at the moment, and subsequently left the Green Party after they went into government. How's the last year been watching from the outside, Saoirse?
Oh, like I expected vindication to come. I didn't expect it to be so swift and so sweet. Like I've been sitting there thinking, have I made a mistake leaving? Was I too emotional? But it just looks absolutely awful. Like whatever about what the Greens are doing and environmentally, like just imagine being in government at all now. Like I watch TVs having to go on and talk about, vaccine rollout and like everything like that. And I'm just like, oh, yikes. I'm glad I don't have to be part of that.
It's good stuff. So you don't regret leaving?
No. Sometimes I do wonder, was it the right thing to do? Was it the wrong thing to do? Like I think, like I know it was the right thing, but then I wonder, like, well, I kind of get stuck in like how else, what's the best way other than that to try and make a difference. And I do find it maybe places like Achill, because of the demographics alone, it feels more difficult to get involved in stuff that maybe isn't political. Like, with political things, there's a very set course of action and there's a very set, this is what you have to do and you have to get X, Y, Z, and this is the format and this is the timeline. But I suppose trying to be useful as a person outside of that, I find takes more imagination, and maybe imagination isn't my strong suit, really.
And for the layman's people watching, I don't really know much about politics. It's kind of like horse racing to me. We had a jockey on there the other day, and the two guys were asking him questions, and I was kind of going over my head a bit. So just for the people at home like me that'll be watching or listening, why did you leave? Why did you leave the Green Party?
Because I didn't get my own way. Because I suppose I was looking at the programme for government was coming up. So it's this document that the parties that are going into coalition present, and then those parties vote on whether to go into coalition based on this. And I think it's the Oireachtas website tracks how much of a programme for government is ever fulfilled. Like it's all the promises that they'll put out, and they never get fulfilled. So you have to kind of look at the programme for government as the absolute maximum you'll get rather than a starting point. And I looked at what was being offered in the programme for government, and I thought it was not enough. I didn't think it was good enough. I thought it was just something I couldn't support. And I did try and canvass within the Green Party for them to vote against it. And we were spectacularly unsuccessful, as it was the Green Party that voted at a higher percentage than Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael to go into coalition. Yeah. So I just, after that, I was like, well, I don't support the programme for government, because I think once your party's in coalition, you can disregard all of the party's policies and what they say they're going to do, because it's all written out in the programme for government, and it's no longer your party. It's no longer the party that you can hold to account. They're the government.
That's still a brave thing to do, Saoirse, because I'm sure there is more than 50% of people that run for Greens or Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. Eventually they come around to thinking that this isn't exactly what they wanted, but they tore the party line anyway. But that wasn't for you.
No, and I think actually party lines do us a great disservice in Ireland, because it's a way, and you see it all the time. You'll see local or politicians, in an area, in a local area, will say, "Oh, well, look, it's the boys in Dublin," and they kind of distance themselves, despite them having toed said party line. And then if they're defending the party, they'll say, "Oh, Europe is making us do it," which often isn't the case. Like sometimes it is, or they'll say, "Oh, the civil servants." Like
It's always
it's so
pushing it away. Like
it's
There's always a
everyone, but it's no
scapegoat.
one's.
There's always a scapegoat.
Yeah, and you never know what they really think, because they and maybe I sound too jaded, even though I was only involved, unsuccessfully for like 2 years, but like there's so much, like it's lying, these people that I like some of them quite, personally I quite like some of them, but it's really like quite whole sickening to see the things people say and do up close. And obviously, like, most people's Twitter bubbles aren't as maybe politically focused as mine. Like, I'm following, TDs and leash and stuff that, backbenchers that you wouldn't really hear of. But watching all of this really closely, you're like, oh my God. And they just say things and just get away with it. And you're like, wow, this is no wonder we're in a dreadful state, because so much of what is said to us by politicians is what they think we want to hear, rather than what they actually think or will actually vote for.
Well, that's it. I mean, they have to make promises. They're not. I'm sure if they went in and told the truth of what they actually can do or plan to do, no one would vote for them. So there's always an element of they have to jazz it up to what people want to hear.
Hey, it's a lie.
Yeah.
Well, it was like was it Pat Rabbit that said that's just what you do in an election? You tell lies. I was kind of like, what?
But how do you change that, Saoirse?
I don't know, and I don't know, would that be like? So I've often wondered in Ireland, especially looking at our general election politics, like, so often you'll have people say, well, I voted for so and so because they got me this, insert thing you're perfectly entitled to anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's in a lot of our politicians' interests to maintain public services in like the most decrepit state, so that it's easier to go to their secretary to get a medical card, and it's easier to go to them to get a pothole filled, and it's easier to go to them to get transport for your kid. When in reality, instead of pulling like personal favors, which is kind of what their office ends up doing, this should be what they're working on legislatively for the whole country. But then, of course, then they can't get all these votes where they're like, "Oh, I did that for you. Remember that?"
Yeah.
So it's like, okay,
it's I scratch your back, you scratch my back, kind of thing.
Yeah, but you're scratching my back, but I have the power to make it that you don't have to even come to me at all. But I choose not to, because I want to be reelected.
Okay, there's a lot of itchy backs.
Yeah.
Would you have ever gone in independent, Saoirse?
I would. I suppose kind of now part of me feels a bit disillusioned in that I wonder how much, I suppose, the power anyone has within the Dáil will only ever be kind of equal to the power or the support they have outside of it. So if I ran as an independent, if I eventually got elected, even still thinking about getting legislation through, without huge widespread support for that legislation, it still won't happen. And I wonder, like, what I've been thinking is how best to build that support outside of the Dáil for kind of progressive politics, without it necessarily being tied to a party, because then it gets into the swamp of party politics.
Yes.
But I'm trying not to think about that now, because I suppose if I did think about that, what I end up doing, I know if I know I'm going to run for election, I end up like feeling like a politician. I end up thinking like, oh, I can't say that. I shouldn't say that. And I don't want to do that. I want to act like a normal person for a while.
Yeah.
Obviously,
100%. You have to chastise what you say. You have to have a filter. Do you know what I mean? We even as comedians try to filter ourselves sometimes. It must be harder as a politician because you might want to say, "How will you fuck off?" or something to somebody, but you can't say that. You can't say that. Have you ever felt like just,
or can you?
jocking somebody in the door or something, or just punching somebody or something?
Yes. And I've often, I suppose, the response I go to, and my brother says he's like, am I the only one who sees how sugary sarcastic you're being? I'd be like, wow, thanks for your advice. That is really interesting. And I'm so sorry that I ever said anything like that. Thank you for correcting me. And like, I know, like, it's a bit shitty of me, but people really, like, people respond quite nicely to it. Like, one guy got into my DMs there just a few days ago. Because I was talking about, that girl who got a high-speed car chase.
Yes.
And I said, Jesus, what did she do? And the Law and Order Brigade, I called him, he got into my DMs and he was like, how dare you? What do you think? She should have been just let go, blah, 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 and on and on. And I was like, look, sometimes when I feel jumpy, I just take a break from Twitter, maybe log off for a while, go for a walk. But he came back to me and he was like, I think I might take a few days off. Like, all right, okay. Good for you. Like,
very well discerned. Very good.
It worked. And everybody has to take a break from it sometimes as well, because it's crazy. Something that happens on the internet isn't real life. But I was reading an article there, was it the Journal or something? They said you got a lot of abuse online. Did you get a lot of abuse when you were running for European and the TD?
Well, yeah, like... So what I get a lot of is people messaging me saying, I don't know how you put up with all the abuse. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't really, I often don't read through my replies. And since my Green Party email address is gone, like, I just know sweet, sweet silence in my emails. Like, I used to get, oh my God, the emails I would get, I'm sure you get them too. I would get like these long emails. One fellow once was giving me this big like men's rights email all the way down the end and right down to the very end where he was like, you really need to educate yourself and read Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro and all these people. And then he goes, and if you cannot afford these, just send me on your postal address and I will buy them for you.
Oh wow, very
thanks.
It could be a strange way of getting your postal address though as well at the same time.
Well, I've come back to my house and someone has been in and left a note in saying they want to talk about politics. They'll call back again, and I'm like, ooh, please don't.
So some of my statements I've made on like videos I've made like that, very like I'll be giving out about the government a lot. Now I do understand that they have to do a job as well, but I really hit the bone. But like that, 9 out of 10 of them replies are funny, it's great like that. But you'll always get one or two nasty comments and who do you think you are, and but like that, you just sort of filter them out, and you actually try and keep the high moral ground, because there's nothing that pisses someone that's pissed off more than agreeing with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
We agree with you, Stephen.
Your approach was to take a principled stand on not believing in the way forward for the Greens, was to go into government with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, which have been in power for 100 years, and it was refreshing, and people have clearly responded to that with you.
Yeah, and the Greens, I think Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael will keep their membership, fairly level.
Yeah.
Like their votes might change, but I think the membership might stay fairly steady, because of how strong and long-standing their grassroots are. But I think the Greens will run into the same problem that parties like Labour have, that parties like the Soc Dems might face, that parties like Sinn Féin might face in the future, whereby people, it's awful to say, like, just have a higher expectation for them, of a higher standard on what they'll do in government. And So I think the Greens will just is hemorrhaging members now, and they seem to be quite unable to stop it, really.
But it's almost
Yeah.
a popular thing. Well, like they've done this dance before with Fianna Fáil. Like, and this isn't obviously just like it's a party thing, because they did vote to get into bed with not just Fianna Fáil but Fine Gael, and it just seems ludicrous.
Yeah, and there was a lot of like around the membership vote, there was a huge amount of kind of lies about what was in the programme for government. Like one I remember particularly was, in the programme for government there was a commitment to a referendum on housing, was the terms.
Yeah.
But people who were pro-coalition kept saying, oh, well, there's a referendum on the right to housing, which there wasn't necessarily the right to housing. And like, I was like, why would they leave that? Like, that's not omitted just to save paper. It's omitted for wiggle room. But there was, between that and I think a very real panic that a lot of people who voted Green or who are Green members felt with this, well, if we don't do this, we'll get nothing done. And then, of course, there was big media pressure. Oh, the Greens could be kingmakers. The time is now for environmental action, sitting on the sidelines. Like, there was this big pressure that if you don't go in, you're, one, immature, and two, wasting an opportunity to get any environmental action through.
Mm-hmm.
Both, I think, of which, both of those assumptions kind of were often stated as fact in these articles without any backup, which was quite interesting. It was saying, like, obviously if the Greens throw this chance away, they won't be considered in the future as government partners, which is like actually not that obvious at all.
No.
Yeah.
It's kind of like they wanted to get into the mafia and idealistically try and change it from the inside, but they got their foot at the table. But if their boots under the table, but that's not going to work, because they're only a small voice in a coalition of two big parties.
But it also benefits the media itself in having Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael there. They're basically their buddies. In the news and media, that Dennis O'Brien's company and RTE are obviously funded by the government or whatever, but they're all in the same little clique, like. And
so many of them are relations. Like, I didn't realize Miriam O'Callaghan is Jim O'Callaghan's, Fianna Fáil's brother. And like Ryan Tubridy is Barry Andrew, who's a Fianna Fáil MEP, and Chris Andrew, who's a Sinn Féin TD's cousin, and Dave McSavage, which I also thought was wild.
Yeah. They're all bonobs at the same cart, really.
But having the Green Party there as well for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, it's there again. It's a little bit of a scapegoat as well. Well, they can sort of put a little bit of blame on them too. They can offset it a bit.
Yeah, and I think actually, like, if you look at the last government, there was huge pressure from environmental groups building on Fine Gael, pressure from environmental groups and pressure from European legislation on the other side, and it feels like, because I do it myself now, that the Greens are in, a lot of that pressure is just being pushed onto the Greens, because everyone's like, come on, like, we canvassed for you, we voted for you, and why are you doing this? While, a lot of the portfolios that will have the biggest environmental impact are still held by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. But all that pressure all of a sudden is gone, and all the ire and all the climate strikes, Fine Gael don't.
Because
care.
Do you think
it's not their voters?
Has COVID taken away from that?
I think it has, definitely, yeah. And I suppose I do kind of get a bit disheartened when you see how we can, as a society, respond to something like COVID if we want to. Like, now, obviously, the response to climate breakdown wouldn't be the exact same, but it shows, like, globally there can be massive, over the course of 2 weeks, mobilization and change of society if we really believed in an emergency. So that is kind of a bit more distressing, because I, oftentimes when thinking about environmental action, I've often ended up gotten to this thing where I'm like, okay, no, it's the way our whole society is organized that we need to change, and that's such a hard thing to change, and that's such a a mammoth task. But in reality, if we believe it's a big enough of an issue, like people did with coronavirus, it's not that much of a task. So what's clear is that we just lack will. We lack political will to do it.
Of course, it must be frustrating for you to see the immediate impact that, like, I seen it. I work in hospitals. I fumigate rooms in hospitals way before Corona, like for different viruses and whatnot. But the spring into action overnight, the buildings they started building onto Castlebar Hospital immediately. Like everything just was changed overnight. Buildings were popping up left, right. Little cabins were popping up left, right, and centre. So, like you said, then there was money offloaded, made available for the what is it, PUP?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, straight away. Like money wasn't an option then. So it must be frustrating to see.
But yes, when it came to adding more ICU beds and having more ICU beds, they just made them a temporary solution to a problem.
Yeah, well, that's true too. Yeah,
keeps on coming back. So
renting the private hospitals instead of just nationalizing them like they did in Spain.
Yeah, it's just like they're afraid to make the massive decisions. It's like putting plasters all over the place.
But is that the proof that they're in the pocket of, big business and big government, or government and big business are intrinsically linked, and basically government is in the pocket of big business?
Well, like definitely in Ireland, I think our large business lobby has a distorted say as to what happens. Like I've seen it with the meat factories, like the slaughterhouses, and they just keep having all these COVID clusters, and everyone's like, "Oh, we can't do anything. Oh no!" And I saw was it Leo Varadkar, was he calling on social media companies? And I'm like, you're the fucking Taoiseach. You can do more than call on govern, legislate. This is your whole job. Your entire job is to legislate. And you're like, please, no. Oh, you don't want to? Okay, no, that's fine. But I think
I can get where the hint of sarcasm is coming from.
But and it's really frustrating because like that, so much can be done, but I think our government, and I wonder, is this a hangover from like a kind of a Westminster style government, seems to act like its job is to facilitate businesses rather than to govern a country, and it is quite like, it's such a everything is so like fungible in Ireland, all these deals and private deals and winks and nods. I was talking to a fella who studied public policy, and he was saying that characteristic of Irish governance is what makes things like the Good Friday Agreement so possible, whereas in other countries where the constitution dictates so much more of what each government minister and civil servant does, something like the Good Friday Agreement wouldn't have worked because so much of it is unsaid and so much of it has to be just kind of agreed.
Yeah. Yes. That's exactly it. And that was a great point there, that it's appeasing big businesses instead of actually govern the country itself. Like they're afraid to upset any of the
multinationals,
corporations.
Yeah.
In case they pull out.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's not even that, because say you went through great lengths to protect all the multinational corporations that actually employ people in Ireland, because that's what's always said. Oh, what about our jobs?
Yeah.
But 2/3 of our foreign direct investment is phantom, so it provides no employment in Ireland whatsoever. And our shadow banking industry is over 2 trillion euros. It's just all like in the IFSC. It is. So this is financial institutions that aren't banks, and and it's all this money just moving through the IFSC, which has different laws, by the way, than the rest of Dublin. It's like the airports and ports have different laws.
Yes.
The IFSC is like that. Obviously, they're anticipating the revolution, but when we start protecting these brass plate companies, then you think, well, like, I understand the argument that we have to keep Apple here because of whatever 600 jobs or how many jobs? 3,000 jobs.
Like that, yeah.
Lots of jobs, lots of mortgages paid.
Yeah, and I think you can definitely argue that we should be building up, I suppose, indigenous businesses. But aside from that, like, the argument completely falls down when you start talking about these companies that are literally just a file on a computer in a room in the IFSC with no one there at all.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we're a tax haven with no palm trees.
Is that just the tax? Is that why they're registered in Ireland, just for tax?
Yeah. Like, there's someone has given me an example recently of there is a company that owns sugar plantations. They're a British company based in South Africa, I believe, with most of their crop coming from maybe Zimbabwe. But because of the 10% tax on sugar or on exports, I think, from Zimbabwe into Ireland, into South Africa, technically, or not technically, virtually, the sales go through Dublin on the way back. So it's a British company based in South Africa, extracting wealth in
another country,
in Zimbabwe, and Dublin. It's all registered in Dublin.
It's kind of like money laundering, but with tax.
It is money laundering, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Crazy. Saoirse, were you always into politics as a young girl running around the playground? Were you always into politics?
No. I definitely wasn't, and I kind of didn't really. I was always into the environment, and I only got into politics a few years ago, as when I suppose I was like, maybe you could do something. In my innocence, I was like, oh, they just haven't thought of something yet. I'll go and I'll tell these politicians, what they should do, because I figured it out, and they're just going to be so grateful for me having figured out what they need to do. And I was talking to different politicians about something similar to Sláinte Care, but for the environment. So it would be a cross-party environmental thing. And it was through them, one meeting like that I met Eamon Ryan, and he asked me to run. So I did, and then I got into politics. And then a year and a half later left again.
Okay, so it'd be like a universal healthcare, but for the climate, kind of.
Kind of, and well, more the issue would be that it would be cross-party, so that it would be removed from party politics, where, like, you see it now, the government will vote against stuff that they're going to bring in themselves just because they don't want to vote for an opposition bill.
You're right. Okay.
Okay.
So just to kind of move it beyond the reach of that kind of playing politics, I suppose.
Exactly. I understand that. Where it doesn't matter. It's not. It doesn't matter which party vote gets it in or votes for it, just as long as it gets in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like that, I suppose, because you have to try and get your seat back next time. It does become less about what can I do best for the country, and a lot of it is like, how will this affect my seat?
Yeah, of course. You mentioned Eamon Ryan there. Is he the man to lead the Green Party, or can you answer that?
He is the man leading the Green Party. I think at this stage, the Green Party deserve Eamon Ryan. They voted for him. They voted to go into coalition for the programme for government. I do not think, though, that the Green Party is representative of Irish environmentalism today, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think because he's leader of the Green Party, he's often kind of conflated with environmentalism, which is unfortunate, I think.
When you say the Green Party deserve Eamon Ryan, do you mean like they deserve to fall on their own sword?
Well, yeah, like you know, they voted to go in to government with a terrible program for government, and so many people have left, and there was so much bullying within the Green Party that the people who have remained, I'm kind of like, well, at this stage, you know, look what they voted for. You know, you deserve each other.
Reap what you sow. Reap what
Yeah.
you sow. Yeah. Jesus.
I think, in my opinion, they're going to get obliterated in the next election.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely going to happen, and I can't imagine. Like, I can definitely imagine a different environmental party starting, because I think a lot of the people in leadership roles in the current Green Party have quite like maybe a 1980s vision of environmentalism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's definitely room for a more progressive environmental party. I wouldn't be surprised if they picked up a few of those Green Party seats.
But
would you join that? Would you join that one?
I don't know. I probably wouldn't make a
up?
decision for a few years.
You still have the green hoodie. You still have the green hoodie, Saoirse.
This is a completely different hoodie, but yeah.
Like, especially with certain generation, say my father's generation, it's not like he sees. It was almost like the blame was laid at the Green Party's feet for a lot of stuff in 2011, and they just won't. There's no redeeming features out of it. Like,
yeah, and I do like. I'm not one to defend the Greens, but when people say like, oh, you know, the Greens caused a financial crash, I'm like, I don't know if it was. I don't know. Like, they had 6 seats, and Fianna Fáil had like 77 seats, and
of course.
it was also a global recession. So I'm like, I don't know if the Greens are that effective, really, to be honest, at anything. Like, that they could engineer like the Lehman Brothers collapsing.
I mean, they didn't squander billions and billions and billions of euro out of this country. The waste that was in this country is just phenomenal. Yeah. You can't blame the Greens for that.
They also didn't implement the austerity that followed. That was nearly all.
Yeah.
That's actually all Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Like.
Yeah, well, they just bent over for Europe or for the Troika. They just literally bent over for them.
Yeah.
What would you do differently if you were? Would you say you were leader of the Green Party or a Green Party or an environmental party? What would you do differently?
The name and Ryan.
Yeah.
Well, I would not go into government with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and I would work to build up support throughout the whole country. So even if you really want to go into government with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, politics aside, right? It's purely strategically, like, the Greens had experienced such a swell in membership and votes in just a year and a half. And I would have taken I would have gone into opposition and taken those 5 years to really pin down, like, you know, cement in a lot of membership and really expand at the bottom, because what you've got, what I imagine you'll have now in 4 years is 12 TDs turning around looking for their canvassing crews and being like, oh, nobody's here, because you don't have the support at council level and the support at canvassing level, like at members and supporters level, was never cemented in. But aside from that, I think a lot of environmentalism really needs to kind of change how it speaks about environmental issues, and like connect them quite immediately to people's jobs and livelihoods and lives, because I don't think you're not going to get support unless people know that acting, or you'll get a certain amount of support, but you'll never get the support you need unless people realize that, you know, acting on the environment can viscerally improve your life, and can make everything better.
And keep your job safe as well, because at the end of the day, I know the environment is a very important thing, but at the end of the day, the country has to be ran as well. So it's a mix of getting the two of them right.
Yeah, but there's not one without the other. Like,
Yeah,
because that's it. There's no balance. It's either both or neither.
yeah.
You were saying there, Saoirse, the I missed exactly what you said, but you said their views, the environmentalist views, was sometimes I feel like the environmentalist views can be kind of militant, and they can kind of annihilate people more than they're trying to bring people together. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Like, am I a militant environmentalist?
Well, no, I don't think you are. You seem like you're nice. You're not militant, but are you? Okay, are you militant?
Well, I was just there just before I got on. I was scrolling through Twitter, and I did see there was a video posted of a Bitcoin mining center, and my thought was like, that should be blown up. And it's just at this stage, like, it is such a waste. Like, doing fantasy sums at like massive energy cost is just like, we just don't have time for that right now.
Unless there was a runoff of the energy that they were producing.
Like if you look at the stats for how much Bitcoin uses just to mine it, it's out of control. Like, it just requires so much energy.
You're gonna have to explain this to me. What is how do you mean mine Bitcoin?
So mining Bitcoin, as far as I understand, is basically it takes a huge amount of computer generation to, and you'll probably get people correcting me, but as far as I understand, it's these computers doing like loads and loads and loads of different sums, and somehow after a certain amount, you get, this is how you get Bitcoin. So it's like all these computer generated calculations that you have to do to get Bitcoin.
Okay.
Like, I don't really, I can't imagine it.
Blockchain, is it blockchain technology or something? Maybe, yeah.
Because,
is there any way
is
there any way they could use that energy like district heating and just? We were talking about this the other day, weren't we?
Actually, yeah.
Well, in Sweden, they use the put them like supercomputers or factories to. Hopefully, they could do that in Ireland, where they could.
It kind of comes from.
Fuel a city. The outputs of factories,
Oh yeah, like the data centers. Well, they'd want to, because it's looking at what if by 2027 it looks like 30% of our electricity will go to data centers.
Wow.
And I'd say they will be using parts like the excess heat for municipal heating, but I suppose Ireland's poor planning laws might make that a bit difficult, because so much of it is like ribbon development. But also, like in Ireland, the issue with data centers is the water abstraction. So our water abstraction laws, and there's one being brought through the Oireachtas soon, they're like put like 1,000 times higher than the north, for instance, before you have to register that you're taking water out. So there's no regulation on how much water you can take. And these data centers.
Why is that? Why is that? It's just archaic laws. Is there old-fashioned laws? Or
no, I think it's because laws. I think it's probably because they weren't that necessary before, and like we talked about before, our government seems to shy away from strict regulations. Like, we're in breach of so many different environmental laws at the EU level, and so we're paying fines for them every single day. Like, the four of us are paying, instead of the government just rectifying the issue. Like, there was one at a wind farm. Is it up in Leitrim or something? And they've been in breach of environmental legislation since, I think, 2009. And we paid something like ridiculous, like $1,500 a day in these fines. But the government is like, no, I'm not going to fix that.
Yeah, again, that's just, sticking plasters on something that you're going to have to come back the next day and stick another plaster on.
Yeah.
So on and so forth.
So the government are just using them fines like a tax. They're like, oh, we'll just use it as tax.
Yeah, like even our emissions tax. So we signed up to reduce our emissions by a certain amount by 2020 and I think 2025. But, we're looking at paying between 200 and 600 million a year. And we're on course to pay that for breaching these emissions guidelines.
There's supposed to be zero emissions by 2050 or something, is there? Or have I got that number wrong? I read somewhere there's a plan for 2050. Was that the goal?
Probably, yeah. Is that the European Green Deal?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
We're miles off that, aren't we?
Yeah, like we're constantly in breach of our emissions in Ireland, and we're just paying for it. But it also, like, it kind of doesn't make sense because, you know, we can pay for it for a certain amount, but we're still going to eventually have to bring our emissions down. We're just making it harder. It's like leaving anything till the last. If only there was some like well-known saying about this, whereby a stitch in time saves 9 or something like that. Like it's just leaving it to the last minute means that our reductions are going to have to be so much more steep, and will, I believe, end up or it will have a greater potential to hurt people the longer we leave it.
Mhm.
Because the reductions will have to be so much more kind of indiscriminate and harsh.
Yeah.
I know that's an awful downer.
It kind of feeds into why people have a lack of trust in politicians. Like, you know, it's almost like they're infallible to a lot of that stuff, which is so obvious. If you're in any other industry at work and you're not doing your job and you're not effectively making the change when something's so wrong.
Yeah, and I've wondered is how to get around that, because I think a lot of that is this kind of parish type politics.
Mhm.
Parochial.
Yeah, like would a term limit work?
But
I don't know.
even when you look at Eamon Ryan and some of the gaffes that he's come out with, like falling asleep in the doll twice and like being turned into
In fairness, if I was in the doll, I'd probably fall asleep as well.
but like it's crazy. And then, or you know, bringing up ideas like having a community car between a number of families, you're just like
30 people.
Yeah, like you're talking about the west of Ireland here.
They do. They have that. They're called trains.
You know, it's almost like a disconnect there, and even or the politicians speak, which I think is the most annoying thing to hear. Saying something that doesn't actually mean anything is the most frustrating bullshit you'll ever hear.
But it sounds like it's said with the cadence of making sense. So you're like, oh, I must have missed something.
Yeah. It's like
it's kind of like Dave McSavage had a comedy sketch on that, and Savage Eye, where it was like he'd have the politicians talking, and then he'd have the subtitles underneath. I'm actually just waffling here underneath those.
Yeah. But like the first guy into politics, that must have been it's almost bamboozling, like.
Yeah, it's shocking, and it's shocking that like people get elected on that.
Mhm.
But as to your point on Eamon Ryan, like sure, Eamon Ryan's not running for election in the west of Ireland.
Yeah.
Now, like part of it is, I think he's just a bit daft with like how he comes out with stuff without thinking, which is also terrible, you know, communications management from him as leader of a party that is in government. And then you have the flip side. Who was talking the last day? Oh, Barry Cowan was talking about so Eamon Ryan brought forward some bill was coming through that ministry about, I think it was about smoky coal, a ban on smoky coal in towns and stuff. And Barry Cowan had this big like a statement on Twitter, and I think he was on the Journal or something like that, and he was talking about how he's glad that you know, domestic turf cutting won't be stopped, and they won't let Eamon Ryan stop it. Now, Eamon Ryan didn't propose to stop it. But Barry Cowan, like the son of, like he's a Fianna Fáil dynasty TD. It got me thinking of, do you know Bo Burnham?
No.
You know, he's a comedian, but he has this song Pandering, and it's about this like stadium country music in the US. But one of the lines is I walk and talk like a farmhand, but the boots I'm wearing cost $3,000. And all I can think of is Barry Cowan. And there's a lot of this like, I am one of the most rural people from the boglands, and these people who are millionaires, whose family are millionaires, and like it's almost
diamonds on the soles of her shoes.
Yeah, and you know, and it's the flip side of Eamon Ryan, who's not paying attention. But part of me is like, Jesus, is that almost worse? These like millionaires cosplaying as these like poor rural people, being like, I too love the turf. Like Ballytown has no more been on the bog in the last 10 years than I don't know who, than Eamon Ryan. But like, but he quite cynically is like, oh, I'll do this to get elected. Like, or Michael Healy-Rae, biggest landlord in the Dáil, millionaire, also son of a Fianna Fáil TD, and like, yeah, this like dress up as these country bumpkins, and I'm like, okay, lads, give it a rest. Like, come on, you know, I find that to be just as insulting as Eamon Ryan talking shite about.
You have to admit they bring a comic thing to the whole, you know, I find them very funny. Whatever about politicians.
They do, yeah.
But that's what people put. That's why young people are put off politics. I know when I was young, it was just kind of like prime time. Oh Christ, not this crack again. Do you know what I mean? And is there any way like of jazzing it up? Is there any way like giving out free cigarettes or something? I don't know. Not cigarettes, obviously. Obviously, that's not good. But is there any way of getting young people involved in a way that, like, it's convoluted as well? It's hard to understand. It's. I think it's deliberate to make people.
It's deliberate, yeah.
Deliberate to not to have the regular person involved. Do you know what I mean? Is there any way of making it a more of a level playing field so everybody can get elected? You know.
As to making it a level playing field, I think a lot of that would be to do with like SIPO rules, like the Standards in Public Office, around what you can and can't do running for election. Like I saw someone released the figures there. SIPO released the figures of how much was spent on each election. And during the European election, the most that was spent in the constituency, the Midlands Northwest, was 200 grand, and I spent 15 grand. And I'm just like, that's really fucking unfair. And that kind of thing, because unfortunately money does get you elected. Of course. Really helps.
So if it was like there had to be a cap on how much you spent, that'd be fair, or they couldn't go over any more.
Well, there is a cap, but it's 230 grand for the European elections.
Okay.
And in the general elections, I can't remember what it is. Is it? I didn't reach the cap anyway. But like you do see some countries where they just have like one postering area, and everyone sends in all their information to like a centralized whatever,
like
office,
almost the county council body, like.
Yeah, and they'll put out, so each candidate gets the exact same number with the exact same kind of format. So it really means people who can afford to put up literally thousands of posters, you know, aren't at that advantage. Like Brendan Smith ran for Fianna Fáil during the European elections, and they obviously paid contractors to go put up like tens of thousands of photos of his face all around the Midlands Northwest. But like they lost the run of themselves up the north. We were going up through Black Lion, and like up in the north there were pictures of Brendan Smith. They were like, should we just throw them up here anyway? Like they were everywhere.
Well, maybe they were getting paid by the hour. You never know. They were just getting rid of them.
Yeah. So there would have to be, I think, financial, like a different kind of financial rules around what to do, because I think if more young people ran and spoke like normal people, I think it would become more interesting. But that isn't going to happen while you can still spend so much, and also while it's really hard to get any sort of media coverage when you're not well known. Yeah. Like it's like the whole chicken and egg thing, and it can be really upsetting. And I think if they maybe strictly regulated, and maybe not forever, but maybe a month coming up to elections, every paper could only get, if they covered one person, they had to give equal coverage to everyone else. Because like all the local papers, for instance, will say, we're running an election special, it's €800 to be in it, or this kind of thing. And you're like, but it's kind of framed like these neutral articles or this neutral coverage, but you have to pay for it.
Yeah,
that's so you're buying your votes there. Well, not buying them, but trying to influence people through the media. If you have the money.
Yeah, if you have the money, which I
game
think
is
is a huge
rigged.
barrier.
But like
It's
something that seemed to be about your campaign that is kind of gone out of it is that you really hit the doors hard. You went all over, especially the MEP campaign that you ran. And I know the TD, when you were running for a TD, you're all over the place in Mayo as well. So there must be an effect off that when you're going direct to voters and talking to them.
yeah, and like I'd say during the European election, we knocked on about, I know, maybe 40,000 doors, but that's because we had no money and no media coverage and nothing else. So we were like, I suppose we just knock on doors. And like,
Any funny stories? Any funny stories from knocking on people's doors?
oh, like, so one, and I love this. My brother's 6'6", I think, and he knocked on this door up in Leakslip, right? It's about maybe 10:30 in the morning, and this woman arrives out, like, dressed up to the nines if she's out the night before, drinking her hand. She goes, "Listen, I don't have your money." And he was like, I'm just canvassing for Saoirse McHugh. Here you go. And she was like, "Oh, all right, have a nice day, bye." And like, he was like, I hope she's okay. Like, I don't know who she was involved with, that like she thought some goon would be sent around to like get her money off her.
She was brazen enough.
Made a
though.
couple pound there.
Brazen. He was like, she was totally brazen. She was like, I just don't have it.
Very good. Very good.
But you get like, there's also what would, like, especially in more rural areas, like, and once again, you know, bringing the tone, like bringing stuff down to a bit of a kind of a grim note, but like, you do forget, or not forget, but like the poverty in rural areas is so kind of invisible. And when you're knocking on doors, you're like, surely no one lives here. And sometimes people do, and you're like, oh my fucking, and you feel terrible being like, oh, hi. And you just want to then talk to people, and people are so lonely.
Yeah.
I find that really hard about canvassing in rural areas, because some places, like, you'd be there on a door for an hour, which if you talk to any, you know, professional canvasser, they're like, no, you know, 3 minutes on a door. You either get the vote or you don't. But like, some parts of canvassing I find quite hard, because you have to kind of detach all like humanity from it. You have to be like, hi, how are you? Will you vote for me? Oh yeah. It'll be great. Vote for me.
Do you have to detach humanity, or you're saying you have to detach humanity, or you're going to get burnt out? Is that what you're saying?
Or you're going to be spending an hour on a door listening to somebody and talking to them.
You'd only get 10 calls a day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or, you know, or just because people.
But is that better than having a sales pitch and being one of those double speak politicians?
Yeah, well, not for getting elected, it's not.
Fair enough. Yeah.
For getting the nice vote, it's great.
Yeah. And even then, like, you mightn't get it. They might be like a pure Fine Gael house, but it's just, you kind of like, I don't know, you just feel like you should hang out. I was canvassing once, and I had this dog who's actually in the back of the car with me. This nice house in Foxford, and there was a path right up against the house, between the house and the lawn. And it was a dormer bungalow. So I'm walking along, and the dog, like, I knock on the door, turn around, the dog's doing like a humongous shit on the grass. And I was like, fuck, okay, the door didn't answer, thankfully. So I pick up my own leaflets in my face and like scoop the dog shit onto them. And I'm walking back along the path, and she opens the window. So she's right beside me. We're like, you know, a foot away. And I have like this steaming hot dog shit on my leaflets. And she was like, looking at it, obviously, because it's right in my hand. She's like, is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, hi, I'm canvassing. My name's Saoirse McHugh. And I'd only had 2 leaflets because I had taken 2 off my boyfriend. I was like, I'll run up and do this house. So he had the whole stack of them. And I was like, that's me I would leave you the leaflet, but I like ran, because she just kept looking at the shit, and I only had leaflets with shit on it. I had to like run and
dog
fire
was delighted with himself.
Yeah. I was like, cry. Every time I pass that house, I'm like, oh God, I wonder who she voted for.
Did you find any animosity in any doors?
Oh yeah, like some people are wild. Like I've been accused of being all sorts of like, Saoirse fronts and I'm looking for the great replacement, and I personally, I'm stopping people grey sheep somewhere, and like a lot of people were really not very nice, and I don't necessarily blame them. Like, you are knocking on people's doors. I found going into pubs the hardest. Like, they'd be like, it's like a Western usually, like people will all just look at you.
Yeah.
And especially in pubs you don't know, you're like, oh yeah, vote for me, yeah, thanks. I love the environment and I love the birds and the bees. And you just like, and people are like, thanks. And it's just, it can be awful. Like, the amount of times I've thought in the last year, like, thank God I don't have to canvass again for myself.
But if you went in a whooping and wailing and buying everyone drinks, then but again that costs money. You have votes coming left, right, and centre. It's just a weird. It's just it's that quick fix people look for.
Yeah,
and there's a particular style, I think, to canvassing. Like my boyfriend's dad used to be an auctioneer, and he just looked like he used to be a publican, used to own Ted's actually, and he like I overheard him canvassing one day. So the first day I went canvassing for myself, I sat in the car panicking for about 40 minutes, being like, what'll I say, and what'll I say if this happens, and what if I say if that happens. And the first time Tom came, most people want like a kind of a, okay, what'll I say, give me a brief here. But the first time Tom came with us, I was walking over to him, he parked, and I was walking over to him with the stack of leaflets, and I was like, so what I usually say is, and he just takes them and walks off. And I could vaguely hear from like a few doors down him like, the environment's the only game in town. Like, he's not an environmentalist. I was like, I can't even imagine what he said on the doors, but he just loved it. Like, I think a certain personality is really good at canvassing as well.
If you were going to change anything about canvassing this time, would you change anything? Would you have more confidence going to the doors? Would you change things?
Oh yeah, I definitely have more confidence going to the doors. Like anything, I suppose you do get used to it. And it's way better going to doors than like having a static street canvassing, because people, like I do it myself, do not want to take anything off you, and so you just stand there and you feel like everyone is like, look at that bell end, and because like people aren't taking anything off you. But at least on a bad door, you look around, you're like, right, nobody else saw that, okay, you can go up to the next one. I think, like, I do think if I was to do it again, I would start canvassing a year before any election, because I do think you have to put time in on the doors, especially maybe when people have been voting for, one or two or three issues forever, or for one or two or three parties. I think you do need to have long conversations. Like, if people don't know you, if people don't know your family, if they haven't voted for your dad, taking the time on doors.
I suppose it's the idea that it's the better the devil you know, in a political sense.
Yeah. And also people lie. Like, I was talking to a journalist who was saying to me, he came canvassing with us one day during the general election, and he goes to me, so I was just canvassing with the Fianna Fáil canvassing team, and they were saying that the Greens are going to ruin rural Ireland. I was like, they can't be saying that. Like, you're kind of like, you're insulted. You're like, I can't believe Fianna Fáil would do this to me. But it's like stuff like that means you kind of have to hit every house.
Yeah.
Would you use social media to a greater extent, or are you allowed to use social media?
You are. I think the most effective social media tool is Facebook, which also happens to be the worst one in existence. Like, I hate the format of Facebook. I go on Facebook and I'm like, oh God, why is everyone so like karma's a bitch? Like, this kind of rubbish that you see on Facebook. And you're like, it's like people type normal things into Facebook and it just comes out crazy. But I suppose Facebook is the most widely used social media. So if I was doing it again, I would use Facebook more. Like I had a page published, but I think for social media to be effective for a politician, they have to be used honestly. Like you see politicians who'll have these photos up and they're like, great to be here at hashtag Castlebar Chamber of Commerce, hashtag discussing, hashtag local opportunities. And like no one's gonna, that's nothing. Like it's dishonest.
It's just a tagline, like it's just a tagline.
Yeah. And it's probably not even effective, I wouldn't say. So I think
I think Mary Lou McDonald uses her. She's a good Facebook page, and she uses it. But again, with Facebook, you have to keep updating it. You have to keep sensationalizing it as well. You have to keep dropping into it as well. You can't let it go. If you leave it go for a few days, it's gone.
Yeah.
You have to feed the beast, the algorithm.
Yeah. But I do. Go on.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you that you said something interesting, which kind of feeds back to Facebook and the fact that you had a lot of people approaching you with very heavy conspiracy-led stuff, being Soros-led and stuff like that. And obviously, a lot of this is to do with Facebook and social media and YouTube and going down those rabbit holes. And like we know friends of ourselves that are further along that side, and
we sure do.
We sure do.
I think everyone, the conspiracy theories seem to be they seem to be more prevalent now than ever. Conspiracy theories.
Being on the leftist side of the spectrum, or perceived leftist on a lot of your ideals, like that must be a bit intimidating when you do have someone approaching you with those, which I would see pretty much stupid ideas a lot of the times.
Yeah, and like sometimes, it's I suppose maybe the first few times I was accused of those kind of things, I found it funny. But especially like it seems that over the last year, there's been a huge kind of, I think coronavirus has opened a lot of people up to these conspiracy theories. And I think conspiracy theories are so attractive because, there is conspiracy out there.
Of course.
But it's just not, it's not those ones. It's not that like,
this is my argument all the time, that everything can't be a conspiracy theory. What happens is because someone that really dives into conspiracy theories, they start not believing in everything. And everything could be a lie. that makes no sense either.
Yeah.
It's like floodgates open, kind of.
And I'd say it's quite intoxicating to feel like you're discovering things, and probably quite reassuring to realize like, oh, okay, well actually this is wrong and that's wrong, and like this is what I always think, like there are so many conspiracy theories out there, like real life conspiracies out there that just hide there right in plain sight. And like the coronavirus, like you saw those big protests up in Dublin the last day. It's a very easy kind of gateway in because people are afraid and people are unemployed now and people are kind of just feeling awful. And so once someone says, well, actually, this is also bad, then all of a sudden like that, it's a slippery slope. Did you see that girl did a cone of social media of conspiracy theories? Did you see that?
No.
She had like confirmed ones, and then there was like ones like, we have questions like Princess Diana's death and Area 51 or 52 or whatever that alien area is in Roswell. And then all the way up to like the anti-Semitic point of no return, where like all the conspiracy theories beyond that were, Saoirse related and lizard people and all these kind of things.
Yeah, well, see, you lose.
Speaking of lizard people, Speaking of lizard people, did you watch Meghan and sorry, I cut over you there, Stephen. Did you watch Meghan and Harry?
I didn't, but I did, of course, enjoy all the memes coming out of it today. Like I did see the Buckingham Palace's response there. They were like, "Oh, we take this allegation of racism very seriously," and I'm like, "Well, you are going to be really, really concerned with what you figure out." Like, because they're like, "We will investigate this matter privately," and I'm like, "Oh, wonder how that's going to go." Like, I can imagine, like, are we racist? Like Prince Philip, of all people, being like, "Am I a racist?" Like, of course.
Yeah,
I didn't realize they responded to it. I didn't realize they responded to it.
like
Yeah.
A little bit.
if
They're
you
looking
think,
at, they're actually having a private meeting.
you think they'd
Okay.
be a little bit concerned about their Harry's uncle there, Prince Andrew, after what all this came out last year, and that was very quickly swept under the carpets.
That was swept under the carpet. Yeah. Yeah.
But like that line about him not being able to sweat, because he was like, "Well, actually, that can't have been me because I lost my ability to sweat in the Falklands War." Like, I think about that regularly, and I'm like, "Wow, what a line!" Like, how did he think that was going to go?
But if it's true, what kind of shady shit was going on in the Falklands War that he lost his sweat glands?
Yeah, like it's the fact that some people are shocked that Harry would want out that if and you're talking about if that is the real story, if himself and Meghan actually want to get out of that type of life and said, well, your uncle is dodgy, you know,
Yeah.
and the rest, and
To say the least, yeah.
But just it does feel like stoking this big distraction. It feels just like a huge distraction to something else. Anyway, maybe that's me going, there's so many more problems in the world, and we're talking about fucking one of the grandchildren of the Queen wanted to fuck off to America for.
But like they wanted privacy, but yet they go on Opera, the most watched talk show in the world.
Talk about the most privileged family in the UK, fucking, and one of them wants out.
Yeah, but like going on Oprah though, because I understand that you want, like, if you get to decide what you disclose, I think that's different. And if you get to control, like, instead of having Piers Morgan write about like how you like avocados, so you're fucking killing the environment or something, or whatever the fuck Piers Morgan writes about. Like, I understand wanting, deciding what media has access to.
Yeah, it was a clever move on their behalf instead of something getting leaked and they couldn't control it, Understand that.
And the British press just, they're so embarrassing. Like, did you see some fella and he was like, Harry and Meghan are not going to take down the United Kingdom, and it's like, fuck off. Like, they don't think like that. Like, they're just Patrick, is it Friend? He wrote a column in the Irish Times and he was talking about the royal family and how they basically just like cosplay as their ancestors all the time, and they just like this irrelevant family of like sweatless creeps, he called them.
But like, if you're Harry, and like, why would you want to deal with the British press in any way, shape, or form when obviously they chased his mother into a terrible situation, and when the car did crash, they were taking photos instead of helping her, which is,
were they?
Yeah, apparently she was still alive and begging for help, and they were taking photos, the guys.
Oh Jesus! I don't know about that.
Hell.
That's not. I don't know if she's begging for help. I think she died in impact. Hopefully, I don't know.
It's again debatable. We weren't there, but
we weren't there. No, we weren't there.
I'd well believe that like the press in the UK have done an awful lot of shady shit. Look what they did to Paul Gascoigne.
Yeah.
And who's didn't? Sorry, go on.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, wasn't Piers Morgan involved in like tapping somebody's phone or something?
He was tapping celebrities' phones left, right, and center. He was the editor of the Sun, wasn't he?
But he wasn't the only one.
Oh no, but like he was basically one that started the trend of getting into celebrities' phones and like Paul Gascoigne was felt like if you watch his documentary, it's unbelievable. But it sent him insane. He didn't trust anyone because he was
Who is he?
Paul Gascoigne with the footballer
Footballer.
in the 90s. He's famous English footballer. He was a character. He was a crazy man. Basically, they tapped his phone every time he talked to his mother or his father about it personal. It would come out in the press, and he assumed that it was his parents that were leaking stuff or his sister that was leaking stuff. So it ruined his life for years. Like he's a
Yeah, it was horrible.
for being an alcoholic anyway, but it damaged him immensely.
Yeah.
Getting back to Harry just for a quick second, he was always a bit of a character. So you're sort of happy for him that it was him that was the renegade, the black sheep that finally just left.
You're kind of happy he got out. You're kind of happy he got out. You know.
Yeah, sure. Like whatever. I don't know. Yeah. Like it would be great if like everyone was like, oh, why don't we just get rid of the monarchy? Like just get rid of it. Like
that's what the hashtag is. That's what the hashtag is. Yeah.
Can't get rid of the monarchy.
The tourism, I know the tourism.
we won't keep you much. We won't keep you much longer, Saoirse. Apart from politics, what gets you up in the morning? What are you interested in?
I was going to ask that question.
Well, what gets me up in the morning, I suppose, at the moment is the hope that like I'll have some relative that I didn't know about that died and left me a fortune. But I suppose I'm kind of looking for jobs at the moment, which I actually hate doing because there's nothing worse than like trying to write. Isn't writing your CV just the cringiest activity ever?
So I see about 100 CVs a day.
Oh, it's the worst. I can't bring myself to write mine. Like sometimes my brother has to do it, sometimes my boyfriend has to do it. I'm like, don't say that. I didn't do that. I didn't do it. And they're always like, look at LinkedIn. Nobody does anything, but look at how impressive they look.
Yeah, it's all lies, isn't it? It's just all lies or embellishments. It's all embellishments.
Yeah, real puffed up. It's awful to watch. Like even reading through other people's stuff, I'm like, oh, stop! You did not. Like you didn't do that. It's fine what you did, but
maybe you're your own worst enemy. Maybe you should just embellish things a little bit.
Our boy loves embellishing and everything.
I just like jazzing things up.
I heard of a story of this guy that had a Michael Flatley's CV, and it was the most ridiculous CV ever. So, Saoirse, just take a vein out of Michael Flatley's leaf and just go to town on it. Do you know what I mean? You can imagine what his CV was like.
I can imagine, yeah. I suppose I'm working at the moment, trying to campaigning against different trade deals that Europe is signing up to, which doesn't sound very exciting, but I assure you it is. And that is taking up a lot of my time at the moment. That and like tree planting, trying desperately to make something grow in Achill. And like you'll see now, May there'll be a big storm, and I'm not joking. They're like crisps. The leaves are like crisps on the trees. You can just go like that, and they just like crumble into dust.
That could be your biggest achievement. Actually, to get them to grow in Achill.
Yeah.
So, Saoirse, how does people follow you if they want to follow you and get involved with helping you with the protesting these trade deals?
Oh, probably Twitter or Instagram, which I'm not on much. Twitter more so is what I spend hours of my life doing. I don't want to. I saw one of these things where you can track how long you spend on Twitter. And I was like, no, thank you. Like I don't.
I'm the same with a lot of them. Twitter is probably the least one we use, but we're getting there.
One more question. What do you do when you're not thinking about politics, planting trees? What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I am a misery guts and I don't have fun. So oh my God, don't put me on the spot like this because I will have things to reveal. I'm like, fun. I do fun stuff. Like
what do you do to de-stress? And
I go to hot countries. Like this is what I do. This is like I think about it all the time. I'm like, I'm gonna go there to hot countries. I read. Is that fun?
Yeah,
I like to read.
Have fun. Yeah. So, but I'm Yeah, no, I have no fun in my life. I'm sorry.
Politicians.
I can't believe you asked me that. And now
You're
you
not,
sound like
politicians
really
aren't allowed to have fun.
Yeah. Like, listen, no one's allowed to have fun during the coronavirus anyway. Fuck it. Like,
Yeah.
We've had fun. We've had fun making these podcasts, and once again, Saoirse, thank you so much for joining us.
you have fun
and
making them, but then you don't edit them, Stephen. So
Yeah, well, that's because I get Chris to edit them, or we get Chris to edit them. So they're fun for us.
Thanks very much, Saoirse, for jumping on. And you must be freezing in the car there. You must be freezing.
I'm actually roasting because I've too much. So because I have it pumped up really high.
Okay.
I went and shaved my head the last day, and I'm finding that really cold.
Show us the shaved head. Show us the shaved head.
I look like a boy though. So I was saying to my boyfriend, I was like, "Do you not think I look like a boy named Connor?" Being like, "Where's my bike?" Do you
I was hoping you shaved your head in solidarity with your Polity Challenge friends here, brothers.
But it's noticeably colder, like noticeably colder.
100%, yeah. We know all about it.
Yeah.
We know it too well. The pain is real.
The hair looks good.
Well, it'll be great. I should have just done it a year ago, and now I'm like, 3 weeks after going lockdown. Now I'll shave my head.
That's all right.
But
I hope it is only 3 weeks, Saoirse.
I hope so too. I think it must be, right? Like it would
I
have to be.
hope so. I hope there's some restrictions lifted anyway. That's for sure.
Hopefully.
I think there will be. I saw the numbers were only at 300 today, which is still a lot, but it's also like finally coming down.
Yeah, big time.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching the Dead Hedgehogs podcast with Saoirse McHugh. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the like button and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And also, if you'd like to become a Patreon member, the link will be shared down below. Saoirse, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks a million for having me.
Thanks very much, Saoirse.